Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Marlys Lampe, the voice of Merschman Seeds, joins us to give an exclusive behind-the-scenes look into our seed business. Ben talks about the advantages and disadvantages of application timing with your pre-emergence herbicides. Tommy talks weather and the recent rain events across the Midwest this week. Check out our social media accounts to stay up to date. Tag us in your planting photos so we can share them on our social media.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe, episode number 36, season 3. Today we have Ben, Tommy, and a special guest, Marlys Lampe. Marlys is the voice of Merschman Seeds. And when you call in, normally she'll be the person that answers the phone, and I'm really proud to say that normally she gets it on the first or second ring. Nobody likes to have the phone ring and nobody answers. So she does a lot more than just answer the phone. Marlys, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, one of the main things I do, I take care of the merchandise. We have a very good line of clothing, I think. We have many different hats, many different styles for all the farmers to wear that have Merschman seeds on it. A lot of t-shirts. We do go down to some youth clothing and hats. We have a lot of stuff for the ladies. And so I do think we have a variety of clothing line. And all you have to do is go on the easy order or just to call in, and I'd be glad to ship something out.
That's great. But Marlys, I think one of the most important jobs you do is you work with the John Deere Finance. As you know, customers have the opportunity to put 0% financing for December following this crop year and pay for their seed at that time. Now, that involves usually some type of application, credit limits. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I do a lot on the John Deere. The bottom line on John Deere, if you have a good credit score, they will pretty much give you a limit, a good limit. I have in the past had some young farmers start out with $5,000. They have to start somewhere. They ask for maybe 20. I said, you're not probably going to get 20. You're young, but you have to start out. Now some of these young farmers have an unlimited amount of credit line, which is awesome. So don't ever feel like you can't try. Always try. You do have to fill in an application, agriculture preferred account. You can either go online and do it, or you can have a paper form to do it.
I've seen you negotiating with John Deere Finance,
yes.
And you say, hey, this young man, he needs a little bit more, and by gosh, most of the time you get it. So, Marlys is going to bat for you to get those credit limits up, and it's unsecured credit, particularly for a young farmer starting out, it's a very important part of his way to get into farming. So I know they appreciate that, and I don't think a lot of folks know that you did this for them or do that for them. Mm-hmm. What's the other area you work in? Licensing, right?
Oh yes, licensing. That's the good one. On the licensing, everybody has to have a technology number. If you are going to grow the Enlist E3, you need a Corteva number. If you grow Liberty Link GT27, I need a BASF form number, and a Steinkorn or Syngenta. If you do happen to have Roundup Ready alfalfa, I need a Bayer number. So you can either go online to Accelerate and just fill out, the questions, answer it right away. You get the numbers instantly, which is awesome way to do it. If not, some people don't have computers, don't want to give information out. I do have paper forms, so you can always call in and get a paper form, and I can get that sent in.
Well, it's a very important part of the business because many of the programs that these large companies offers are tied to the sales numbers and also the license numbers. And we have to report every bag of seed to those various companies based on what you planted, and that's reported in, and then of course tied to a lot of marketing programs. So Marlys, we appreciate you taking time away from the phone to come sit with us today. And now we'll go over to Ben and see what what was going on about a year ago or right around a year ago.
About next week, a year ago, we got 4 to 8 inches of snow. So it just goes to show how different every season is as we move through stuff. Tommy's going to touch on weather a little bit, but one of the things that I wanted to touch on is maybe instead of jumping out there and planting, what are some of the other things that we could be working on? And one of the things I wanted to touch on was pre-emergence herbicides. So I wanted to talk about some advantages and disadvantages to getting your pre-emergence herbicide put out really early versus a week before the plant date versus after the planter has already rolled. So one of the main advantages that we're going to get, especially if we're using high robust rates of the PPO style herbicides, the Valors, the Fierce, the Authority style herbicides, is if we put that herbicide out early, 3-4 weeks before you start planting, it's going to have a lot less crop injury. You're a lot less susceptible to crop injury because more likely than not you're going to get a rain to activate. It's going to dilute it out. It's going to put it in the soil the correct depth that it needs to be to start knocking out the weeds when it's coming through, and you're not going to see the injury because there's not a super hot layer as the beans pull themselves out of the ground. Same concept for corn. If you get it out early, you know it's out there and you know it's activated.
So you basically eliminate that hot zone with dilution into the soil. And then how much rain does it take to activate most pre-emerge?
Iowa State had a nice article about this we'll link to. A half inch is really what you need, a half inch going towards an inch, because they talk about certain herbicides having more solubility or less solubility, and it really doesn't affect, it may activate a little bit better, but to get the full effectiveness of the herbicide, you really do want the half inch moving towards an inch of rain, because you're always going to have misses if that herbicide isn't fully activated. So some of the disadvantages that happen when you get that herbicide out there really early, you're not going to get quite as much residual out of the product because it's out there earlier. It's not going to break down as fast because it's cooler, but you're going to shorten your residual life a little bit. So you're going to want overlapping residuals if that's something that you're 3 to 4 weeks out on. Also, any movement that you do, if you have to go back in and till, to level stuff up, or if you have to go in and you have too much trash and you have trash whips on your planter that are rolling or moving, anytime you move that dirt away, that leaves an open spot for the weeds to come back through because you've disrupted your barrier. So make sure that the ground is level and ready to roll when that herbicide does go on, because any tillage, unless you're using a yellow product, any tillage that you do from that point on is going to be a lot less effective. So as we move closer to the week, now you're now putting your herbicide down a week before planting is probably the optimal time, because you might get a rain on it, and you're talking a week to 2 weeks for that crop to emerge out of the ground. So there's some decent likelihood in April and May to get rain to activate that product before the beans and the corn come out of the ground. That week to 2 weeks ahead of time is probably the most optimal time, because you're still getting maximum residual, but you're also you're getting maximum residual, but there's probably the most crop safety at that point. And then you move towards the fall chasing the planter, and that's probably when you have the highest risk, because you might not get a rain to activate that herbicide, especially if we're going into a dry year. The rain, you might not get a rain to activate the herbicide, and if you do get a rain, there's a higher likelihood that it's going to happen when the beans coming out of the ground. You're going to get splash up, you're going to burn hypocotyls and have issues from that standpoint.
Well, the number one reason to use a pre-emerge is a basic theory says the best way to fight resistant weeds is to never see them. Mm-hmm. And that's why residuals are so critical, because that makes all the weeds the same height when you spray your first layer of post, correct?
Correct.
So then, you don't have 6-inch tall ones and 2-inch tall ones. And so the one rate is very effective across the whole spectrum of the weeds that you're trying to kill.
Right, and those overlapping residuals is things that people are going to continue to talk about as, we have resistance to Liberty down south. You're going to want higher rates of overlapping residual, which have more chance for crop injury. So, we want to do the job right so that we're not in that position in the future.
There's another good reason to use residuals too, and it's a saying says weed free the first three weeks. Mm-hmm. And something about plants can sense the competition. It's kind of a theoretical thing, but they sense the competition around them. And if they see that there's a lot of potential competition out there, they tend to scale back a little bit, as far as yield potential. So there is a lot of data to support that there is some improvement in yield if you don't get that initial weed competition.
Especially in corn. University of Illinois has awesome articles about that if you wanted to Google that. So
weed free the first 3 weeks.
So Ben, a little Riskverse Reward here. What, with what we're setting up here with, obviously we got wet conditions right now. Guys are going to be chasing planters probably with pre-emerge or vice versa. What do you think, how far to delay that planting instead of chasing the pre-emerge with the planter? Or, some guys may skip pre-emerge herbicides, which we obviously don't condone, but What do you think Riskverse Reward coming down here in the future in this next week or two when a lot of these pre-emerge herbicides have yet to be put on?
I think it's all every individual situation is different. Know what your herbicides are. Know that authority products and products that contain Valor are at the highest rates are going to be the most have the highest chance for seed safety issues. Know what your forecast is going to be. Are you going to have a half inch of rain coming up in that time frame? I mean, every situation is different, so you just really got to.
What about soil conditions? They play a little bit into that as well, or soil type. Sorry.
Yeah. So the finer the soil type, the heavier load that the heavier, higher rate that those pre-emergence herbicides can handle. The coarser, so the sandier style soil is much more prone for seedling injuries. So a lot of time we pull rates back on those styles.
Cool wet. That's when you're going to have injury from some of these pre-emergence, right? Cool wet. That slow emergence process.
Correct. So when the soybean's growing fast, I mean, anytime you can have ideal conditions where the soybean blows through that hot layer, the better off you are.
Good enough.
Well, Tommy, I know you've been studying the weather here from a couple different perspectives. So
yeah, Joe. So a lot of interesting things. We had about 2.5 inches of rain over here in western Iowa, which is really good, especially with the drought conditions that are over there that John felt with blue water outlook checked out. So and also, Joe, you gave me some information here from John. The past 30-day percent of normal precipitation was above normal in western Iowa in these droughty areas. But what's really interesting is the 60-day percent of normal rainfall is going to be above normal in those areas. So what we're seeing here with a little of these cooler conditions is we're going to have a little more precipitation coming across here with the Midwest. So with these pre-emerge, what's going to get things slowed down here with planting. We're going to get be able to plan a little bit more, get things done with field work, get the pre-emerges put on, get that soil or that seed put in good conditions so we can have a good year. So a lot of good things coming here with precipitation, with the drought side of things, and kind of get things slowed down so we can get some deliveries and get all these special things done here. So
yeah, I noticed that. I looked at that drought monitor too, and the next 30 days, the next 60 days was very favorable for the western part of Iowa, which has really been suffering. And maybe as we put these things up, folks can look at it, but maybe a little bit drier to eastern Iowa and western Illinois, but not critical. So,
not critical.
But so I think potentially a good crop year. So farmers want to do everything that they possibly can to maximize their yields. We had our Iowa State economist last week that talked about the markets and whatnot, and I'm looking that farmers are going to have a great year.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, Joe, that last system that we had come in middle of last week there, everything pretty much, I mean, we had about an inch west of the Illinois River, and anything to the east of the Illinois River was about a half inch or less. So, planting's going to probably tick up over there, which again is going to help a lot of these just-in-time deliveries that we had Joe Sinclair a few weeks on talking about. So, good things to come.
Has any planting been gone on in our marketing area this past week?
Yeah.
What, corn and beans both?
Yep. We saw corn and beans go in the ground Monday, Tuesday. Guys kind of pulled back on Wednesday because we ended up getting showers Wednesday afternoon.
Right.
So,
but especially in that Springfield, Illinois area, there was a lot of crop that went in as well.
Half inch is going to slow them down. For long. So,
well, spring is sprung. So, speaking of weather, I got a great quote from Mark Twain. Now, Mark Twain from Hannibal, Missouri, not far from here. In the spring, I have counted 136 different kinds of weather inside of 24 hours. And that's kind of what describes exactly what we're going through.
Yep.
Well, my corny joke for this week is beer. And we're from a German community here in southeast Iowa, so we take our beer pretty serious, like a lot of small towns that have German ancestry. This one here is a situation where all the presidents of the various beer companies were at a beer festival in Great Britain. So after the Great Britain's Beer Festival, all the brewery presidents decided it'd be fun to hit a pub in London and go out for a beer. The first company president sits down and says, "Hey, senor, I would like the world's best beer, a Corona." The bartender says, "Sure, no problem," gives him a Corona. The second one says, "I'd like the best beer in the world. Give me the king of beers. One Budweiser, please." Bartender gives him one. Another guy says, I'd like the only beer made from Rocky Mountain spring water. Give me a Coors. The bartender gives him one. The guy from Guinness sits down as he orders a Coke. The bartender is a bit taken back, but gives him what he ordered. The other presidents look at him and ask, why aren't you drinking a Guinness? And the Guinness president replies, well, if you guys aren't drinking beer, neither will I.
That's a good one.
Well, we hope this week is favorable for your drying out and getting back in the field, and please be safe. Your family depends upon that. We appreciate your business, and as always, thank you, and we'll see you next week.